here. First of all, I'd just like to thank the Danbury team for organizing this amazing event today. And then to every single one of you for coming, thank you very much. The amount of people here today really show the commitment of the Zimbabwean pig farmers to learning and to improve their operations. My name is Philip Pretorius. I work for a company called Urban Farmer. We are a nutritional solutions provider, manufacturing macro premixes in South Africa and exporting them into 20 different African countries at the moment. We also have a franchise in Zimbabwe called Urban Farmer Livestock Solutions. And it's very important for us to have people on the ground here. We don't just want to send a premix to a farm and just leave you with the product. We really focus on customer engagement and making sure we assist you how we can, whether that would be with analyzing your different raw materials, formulating for you, or even doing consulting on farm. So today I'm speaking about swine nutrition, and the topic I chose for today was a holistic approach to swine nutrition. And the reason that I chose to speak about this is because there are plenty different aspects that influence the nutrition on your farm to finally get the perfect solution for you feed-wise on the farm. Long gone are the days where one single bag of full feed is sufficient for your pigs on the farm. As we heard today, the pigs have improved dramatically when it comes to genetics, and there's also a term called precision nutrition that is very important these days as we feed different phases of feeds to animals at different stages in their life. So just the agenda that I will speak to today, firstly I will just quickly go through why nutrition is actually important in your livestock operation. Then I'll quickly give an intro into your nutrients, and then we'll look at the 5 aspects that we as nutritionists look at when getting the perfect feed to your farm. And that includes your animal requirements, your ingredient contributions, the feed formulation that we do, how that feed is produced, and then finally how that feed is presented to the animal itself. So first of all, why is nutrition important? I think we all know that it is important, but I don't always think we grasp about how nutrition actually affects our profitability and the extent to which it does. So 65 to 70% of your production costs are actually your feed when taking a piglet to slaughter weight. This is really a tremendous amount, so we have to do our part to get this product, to get the feed cost as low as possible and as efficient as possible to ensure that we are profitable. I know all of us sitting here today are passionate about pig farming, but at the end of the day, we are running a business when we farm with pigs, and therefore we have to crunch some numbers. So the parameter we look at most when it comes to profitability feed-wise is your FCR, which is your feed conversion ratio, and calculated as the total amount of feed consumed divided by the weight that animal gained in the same time frame. Now there's a few ways that we can approach improving this FCR and getting it as low as possible. First of all is to let your pigs grow faster, and thanks to amazing genetics companies like Danbred that really have bred these pigs to a point where the average daily gain potential for a grower pig is really very, very high. And now the responsibility is on us as nutritionists to feed this pig as specific as possible to get as close as we can to the genetic potential of this animal. Nutrition, however, is not the only thing that plays a part in your profitability at the end of the day, but when you use precision nutrition along with good genetics and good on-farm management, we can make you as much money as we can on your pig farm. So just a short introduction on different nutrients. An animal requires a wide variety of nutrients. The main ones which we focus on is energy, which comes from your carbohydrates, your fats, and your sugars. Then protein is another very, very important part. Two other nutrients that gets inserted at a very low level but play just as crucial part is your vitamins and minerals. And then one nutrient that's often forgotten but one of the most important is your water. So first we're going to look at energy. quite complicated to explain, and it's defined as the ability to do work. The reason it's quite complicated is there are different levels when it comes to defining energy. First, you get your gross energy, which is the total amount of energy in a bag of feed. But then once a pig consumes that, and the fecal energy is by the wayside, you're left with what's called digestible energy. Then once your urinary and gas energy from the pig is expelled, you're left with metabolizable energy. And finally, once that feed is digested, a heat increment is produced and more energy is lost. So at the end of the day, you sit with net energy, which is the actual energy that a pig can use for its systems and maintenance, and that is what we use as nutritionists to formulate on these days. So energy is the field required by an animal to perform all of its functions, including homeostasis, maintenance, growth, and the reproduction of the animal. As I mentioned, energy is supplied by carbohydrates, sugars, and fat, and even protein. It's important to note that every single ingredient or every single raw material that you add into your feed does have a certain portion of energy added to the diet, but we'll discuss this in a bit more detail in just a second. Energy is described in megajoules or kilocalories per kilogram, and in our formulations we usually present both, as some genetics companies give us instructions on megajoules and some others on kilocalories, so we present both just for you to efficiently use that on the farm. And another reason why energy is extremely important is because this is the most expensive component of your diet, compromising more than 50% of your total diet cost. As you all know, we add a lot of maize in our diets these days, and the pig is able to digest that, but adding 600 plus kilos of maize at the cost that it is at the moment really is a big portion of our diet costs. So the raw materials that we often use in Zimbabwe as our energy sources is mostly maize and wheat, but we have also formulated with barley, cassava, different sugars, and different oils and fats. This brings us to our protein, which is a very crucial nutrient for growth, for muscle and skeletal development, for tissue repair, and enzyme and hormone production inside of the pig's body. The protein is made up of amino acids, which are essentially the building blocks for protein development in a pig's body. There are 20 different amino acids, which is quite a lot, and this is split up into essential and non-essential amino acids. Non-essential doesn't mean a pig doesn't need it and is not important. Non-essential simply means that a pig already has produced that in its body, and essential amino acids are amino acids that we have to add in the diet to ensure that there are correct levels of all of these amino acids in a diet. Due to there being so many different amino acids, we usually choose the most limiting amino acid, which is lysine, as our reference amino acid, and all of the other amino acids in the diet is then formulated at a ratio to lysine. The protein is also supplied by different ingredients. First of all, ingredients from plant origin, which includes your soya meal or oil cake, your sunflower oil cake, and your groundnut oil cake. Then we also have ingredients from animal origin, which includes your meat and bone meal and fish meal. And this is actually very good ingredients to use in your pig rations due to the amino acid profile and digestibility of those amino acids in these compounds. The reason we don't add too much of that in a diet is simply because of the cost of these products. I think all of us know how expensive these are, but I would as a formulator, I definitely recommend adding these in specialized diets such as your group feed and even your Weaner 1 feeds. And then there are also synthetic amino acids that usually comes in your macro premix solution, just ensuring that we get to all of the amino acid levels that we require. Okay, so can feed the best protein levels, but if your energy levels are not correct, your pig won't grow. And just vice versa, your energy can be sufficient, but if your protein content isn't enough, then your pig also won't grow. So it's very important to formulate in a ratio of energy to protein. When underfeeding your pig on protein, you really stunt the growth. There's poor skeletal development, which this then means your pig didn't develop that skeletal system, and it doesn't have space to put on all of the muscle that we need to eventually sell this pig at a good market price. And then underfeeding your protein also has huge risks on your animal health. And then overfeeding on nutrients, there can be certain negative effects when it comes to certain minerals, but the big problem with overfeeding is just you're throwing your money down the water. Your protein is a very expensive source, so adding that too high and your animal can't use it really isn't beneficial to your operation. And a quality protein, which is defined as a protein source with a good amino acid profile, a good availability to the animal, and good digestibility, is even more important than just a crude protein level on a bag of feed. Okay. Then the macro minerals, these are involved in many different processes in a pig's body, ranging from the structural framework of DNA and RNA to bone development, electrolyte balance, and growth metabolism. As you can see, I mentioned at functions of the different minerals, I mentioned a lot of the stuff twice or three times. That is because your minerals, your protein, and your energy works together to build your skeletal system, to ensure good muscle growth, and eventually get your pig to where you want them to be. And then the major macro minerals that we usually formulate on includes sodium, chloride, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. Okay. Two of the most important minerals is your calcium and your phosphorus. This is contributed in small part by all of the different ingredients, but we usually supplement this by limestone and MCP or MDCP. Again, there's a difference between the total amount of phosphorus in the diet and the available phosphorus in a diet. The available phosphorus is the only part that the pig can use, so that's why we formulate on an available phosphorus level. And then again, we work on a ratio of calcium to phosphorus, which that ratio we usually work on a minimum of 1.5 to 1.1 of calcium to phosphorus. Then another very, very important mineral is sodium. Again, contributed to by many different ingredients, but supplemented by adding salt to the diet. The sodium content in your diet plays a huge role on your electrolyte balance in your bloodstream, and this has an effect on your appetite and many different other factors. Again, having a correct amount of salt in your diet could prevent some tail biting in your systems as well, but there is also a risk of poisoning when adding too much salt to a diet. Then adequate supplementation of trace minerals is extremely important, and these are done at extremely low levels, but doesn't mean that it is any less important than the macro elements that we add to the diet. These vitamins and trace minerals include everything from your B complex, your B1, 2, your D vitamins, A vitamins, and then trace minerals like copper. And all of these are usually supplied by your premix pack that you add into your diets. And again, using a good quality premix supply is important because the stability and availability of these minerals are crucial in a diet. And then our final nutrient, which is often neglected, but yet in my opinion one of the most important ones, is water. A limited water availability on the farm will immediately reduce your feed intake and consequently slow your growth and performance. And then the temperature and quality of your water is crucial, so definitely an aspect that I'll focus on as much as possible. Okay. now eventually get to the nutrition part and the 5 different steps that nutritionists consider when formulating a diet and finally presenting it is the animal requirements, the ingredient composition of the different raw materials that you use, the feed formulation programs that we use, how you produce your feed, and how we present that feed to the animal. Okay, so as has been discussed today, there are different types of breeds, and all of these breeds have different requirements, and we as formulators have to formulate very, very specifically to different breeds. And that is why companies like Danbred or Topics or whoever it may be share the nutrient specs of that breed with us as nutritionist companies, and we then put that into our formulation programs to ensure that when we add raw materials and premixes that we get to those specifications for lysine, for protein, and all of the other nutrients in the diet. Okay, then the second part is the life stage. As I mentioned, you can't feed all of your pigs on the farm with the same bag of feed. There are different life stages, from a piglet to a weaner, your grower, your finisher, and then your gilts, your lactating sows and dry sows, which all have to be fed different and all have different requirements. Then the environment that the pig is in, I mean, this differs completely. We have fully EC houses, which are environmentally controlled houses in Europe and some in Africa. But the environment also plays a role in how good that animal can perform, and we can slightly adjust our formulations when we know where this pig is housed, the temperatures and all of that. And then the health status of your herd, I mean, an animal that has health problems definitely has a higher nutrient requirement, because it has to stay at maintenance, but also then fight off the different sicknesses and something we keep in mind. Then the economic environment also plays a role. We often ask customers at what age or at what weight they want to slaughter, because that affects how we adjust the growth curve for them to get to that certain point to be as profitable as possible by adjusting the nutrient levels in the diet. This is just the production cycle, but I think we've spoken to that a lot today. And this is just a table that I added showing the different requirements of the animals at different life stages. As you can see, the energy differs, your lysine to energy also differs then, crude protein, so everything differs from phase to phase, and it's extremely important that we match these specs and also not overspec a diet, because then you're paying too much for your feed. Okay, so the second part is your ingredient composition, and if you take something away from this talk, I would really say it's this slide and the importance that I place on the procuring of your raw materials. I know it is difficult, but I would really put in the time and effort to look into the different raw material suppliers in your area, look at the quality that they give you, and really identify one that you want to walk a path with as your supplier. And I also recommend obviously having a backup for that. As we know, many times your main supplier doesn't have the feed the raw materials that you need. But definitely do some research, put some time and effort into this, as the quality of your feed is really determined by the raw materials you put in this. You can request certificates of analysis from suppliers. I know not every raw material supplier does give you that, but if that's something given to you, definitely something you can share with your nutritionist to make sure that the feed you are getting the raw materials you're getting is actually the thing we are formulating with. And then as soon as you receive raw materials, there's actually some visual assessment that you also can do. As you can see here is a bag of maize, and unfortunately this bag of maize has a lot of external debris that isn't pure maize kernels. When you open your bag of maize, you really want to see only maize kernels and not a lot of extra leaves and roots and stuff. That really affects the nutrient composition of that bag. And Then another thing to look for is discoloration, a darkish color in your maize kernel. This can often be mold inside of that maize kernel itself, and this carries mycotoxins, which is a huge problem for us as pig farmers, and I really won't recommend using maize if you can see that mold growing on the maize itself. Then you can also just give your maize bag a quick smell. If it's a very acid and moldy smell, again, that feed or that maize was too wet when it went into the feed bag, and mold started to grow, which could be very detrimental to your animals. And then on the soya meal side, you're really looking for a soya meal which has a constant color. I mean, if your color is, if you look at the bag of maize and part of it is light and a part of it is dark, there's really some overcooked and undercooked soya, meaning that the percentage given to you as a crude protein value really isn't as stated on the bag, due to some of that protein not being able to be used by the animal. So as I said, the quality of your feed is determined by the quality of your ingredients, and your ingredients on a COA or a certificate of analysis will usually have your moisture, your protein, your carbs, fiber, fat and ash. And this is definitely something you want to share with your nutritionist before they formulate, as we work with these values that we get from your supplier company and work it into our matrices. So this is an example. I know you won't be able to read there, but this is an example of the matrices that we use when formulating. So as I said, every ingredient has a portion of each different nutrient that you will need, and this is built into our formulation software, ensuring that the different ratios of nutrients in one raw material is in your final formulation. And the reason we usually request COAs from our customers is we don't only have a single maize as an ingredient on here. We have different maizes at different protein levels, and so there could be a maize of 8%, a maize of 7.5%, and then the nutrient constitution of that maize differs a lot. So ingredients, so going further in ingredients, we really recommend analyzing your raw materials yourself on a NRR machine, if possible, if you don't get the COAs from your raw material supplier, and that is why we as a company also do a lot of effort in the different regions we work to analyze as much as possible of these raw materials to get an understanding of the commonly used raw materials. So if a farmer comes to us and he doesn't have an analysis and he doesn't have the ability to analyze that, we really more or less know what the maize in that area for that season is, and our formulation can be as accurate as possible. It's important to know as well, not all products are created the same, and products with the same common name can differ completely. And the example I want to use here is the example of soya meal. You get different soya meals. You get mechanically extracted soya meal and also solvent extracted, which plays a huge role in the protein limit of that. So COAs from a raw material supplier or external analysis is really preferred before formulating. Okay, after 30 minutes of talking, we finally get to our job, and that is the formulation of your final feed. As I said, the availability of your raw materials goes in, the price at which that product is landed on your farm goes into the formulation, and the nutrient composition from our matrices and from the analysis you share goes in. Then the nutrient levels shared by the genetics companies is also inserted into the program. Your ingredient limits is also inserted for certain minerals and even ingredients, because some of them can be toxic at too high levels. And then we formulate, we get a formula, which then also can be analyzed again on a NIR, just to make sure that the final food that you have produced in your mill is actually what stands on a formulation. And then we go into production, and there is a lot of quality insurance measures that go in place to making sure the quality of the final food is really there. So this is just an example of a generic formulation that we have done for Zimbabwe. Some of the prices may vary, but as you can see, we start off with your different raw materials, your maize, your barley, your soya, and then we also add a price to that, and then there are different inclusions of that different raw materials. Using that price, we then get to a final feed cost. We also have different premixes for the different stages. As I said, the amino acids requirements are completely different for pigs on different life stages. So we have six or seven different macro premix packs that we use to formulate this final diet. And actually having this cost of your feed along with your FCR brings us to the golden number that you need to make sure that your farm can be profitable, which is the feed cost per kilogram gained. If you have that and you know what your pigs get at market, you can really see if you are profitable at the end of the day. And then just the crucial minerals and nutrients that we spoke about earlier, we always include that in our formulation as well, just for the feed mill or the farmer to have assurance that this is formulated accordingly and according to the spec that he wanted. This is just a graph that I added to show you the importance of different feeding phases. If you take the green line here, that is the requirements of a pig for lysine as it gets older. So it's a percentage of SID lysine against body weight on your axis this side. And when you look at the blue line, which is a two-phase diet, you're very often under that green line, over that green line, and over that green line again. So when you're under that green line, you're actually underfeeding that pig on this nutrient, and when you're over that green line, you're wasting money. So that's why we recommend at least 4 phases for pigs, but preferably 6, because as you can see, you stay much closer to the actual requirements of the animal when using different phases for feeding. Again, earlier I spoke about ratios when it comes to feeding, and one thing I want to highlight here, your feed is only as good as your first limiting nutrient. So your energy, again, can be perfect, but if lysine or methionine isn't at the right level, that energy goes to waste, and the pig won't really grow or perform as you'd like. This brings us to another important topic, which is feed additive. And at the moment there are thousands of feed additives companies, and it's really difficult to know for a farmer which of these are the best. There are plenty of different, I only named a few here, but there are plenty of different types of feed additives, which include your enzymes, your mycotoxin binders, amino acids, probiotics, AGPs, organic acids, gut modifiers, etc., etc. And it is really difficult for someone as a farmer or a feed mill to have the time to go through every single one of these and calculate a return on investment for them as a feed mill or integrated farmer. So that is why we are huge fans of a macro premix solution. So a macro premix solution is not only your vitamin and mineral premix pack, but it's a larger pack that includes all of your essential amino acids. It includes feed additives. There has really been researched by a company. For our company, for example, we have weekly meetings with different additive suppliers who present us with their research, and then we can make an informed decision of the best thing to go into a macro pack for a specific customer or for a specific region. So I think it is best for someone that's not producing 20 20,000 tons of feed a month, really to look at a macro pack as the safest option. Then that headache goes onto your premix supply, and that's not a hassle that you have to deal with. Okay. Finally, we get to feed production, and there are numerous amounts of feed production systems. I mean, some of our customers using a very small macro pack that we designed for smallholders can even mix feed on a cement floor. Then you get normal cement type mixers, and then you really get a more commercialized feed mill. It doesn't matter which type of system you have, the same principles applies. Again, as I said previously, procurement is the most important aspect in your feed production phase, but then also the storage of those raw materials. If you don't have silos where your raw materials is stored, and you receive these raw materials in bag form, I really think we always recommend keeping these raw materials in a clean and dry space, keeping them on pallets and keeping them away from the walls. Because when your feed bags are lying on the floor or against the walls, you can very often have condensation on those bags, and then it's again an opportunity for mold to grow and mycotoxins to get into your feed. One crucial investment when mixing your own feed is a good quality scale that is calibrated accordingly and calibrated often to make sure that you're really weighing the right amounts. When we work with ingredients like limestone and NDCP and stuff like that, it's really important for you to be able to measure those ingredients accurately, because a 2 or 5 kilogram difference can really make an impact. And then on the mixing side, we always recommend after your raw materials has gone through the animal to add your largest raw materials in the mixer first. So your maize will go in, your bran will go in, your soya, and then afterwards your premix pack, just to make sure that your mixing is really done correctly. And then on the mixing side as well, you have different mixing times on certain mixers, which is recommended by the manufacturers of those mixers. But if the feed is coming out in mash form, and you take a look at that feed, and you can really see the difference between the wheat and the maize in that diet, it definitely means that your feed isn't mixed properly, and then you will see a lot of uniformity issues on the farm. And then pricing of these feeds, grinding is very important. We really want to get the grinding quite small when we feed pigs, because this improves the digestibility. When your hammer mill works effectively and there are small particles, there's more surface area for the gut microbes to actually digest that feed. And then pelleting, I know pelleting isn't done much at the moment in Zimbabwe, and probably most of you use mashed feed. I have no problem with that. Mashed feed and your pelletized feed will have the same nutrients, but there are a few positives when you use mash. Your intakes is slightly improved, your digestibility is slightly improved, you actually reduce wasting, because when mash falls on a wet floor, the pig is not necessarily going to eat that again, but if a pellet falls on the floor, there's a big chance that the pig will go and pick that up again. And because of the heat that is added during pelletization, some of the bacteria present in the feed can be sterilized, and all of these factors then eventually improve your FCR slightly. But there's a lot of expert knowledge that goes into making a correct pellet. I mean, there's steamers and coolers and boilers, so it really is something you have to consult your manufacturer if you want to start making pellets. So sitting with the engineer from the manufacturing company and your nutritionist to get a perfect pellet is really important. And then finally, the feed presentation. This is just how we give this feed to the animal. And when we're giving creep feed, we want to teach these pigs to eat. Remember, a small piglet, the digestive tract isn't fully developed yet, and we really want to get them eating as soon as possible, just to start developing the digestive tract, because that would mean digestibility in your weaner and grower phases just go better. For this reason, we want to make the croup feed as fun as possible, really, and also give it a good taste. That's why we normally add a lot of milk replacer in our croup diets. So this is really just to begin digestion, and also to take some pressure off of the sow that is producing all of the milk for these little piglets, just for them to get some nutrients from the feed itself. And then your weaners, when you do early weaning, they really struggle to get onto the feed. So again, having quite a fine feed is important. Sometimes what we recommend is wetting the feed actually to stimulate that intake, but this has to be done frequently. You don't want to make your feeder full and wet everything, then again mold will grow and problems can occur. Now at this stage, when pigs are growers and finishers, they are really machines, and we want to push this intake as much as possible. So we give ad lib feed and try to get them to eat as much as possible. Then the sows, we really feed gilts and sows differently. I mean, a gilt is still growing, and as was mentioned previously, we want to match the growth curve that Danbred actually recommends, and these pigs are actually growing too fast for that. So what we usually do is we either ration the feed or we feed a lower density diet in our gilt diets. Then feeding the lactating sow is very important. I mean, at this stage, she's not only eating to maintain herself, but also to maintain 15, 16 other piglets, so very important. And then again, the diet change happens when you go to the dry sow. So thank you very much, everyone. That's me, and we looked at all of these factors today, and I hope you learned something. If there's any questions, you can come and ask me afterwards, and we can assist as we can. Thank you very much.